Hi, I'm Paul, the Happy Gilder. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be covering the equipment that I use to make the reverse glass signs that you can see on the wall behind me. Now, I get a lot of questions about this, so I'm only really going to be covering the sort of hardware side of things, not delving into the software and things like that. But before that, if you're a fan of Victorian techniques, gold leaf, sign painting, reverse glass and digital processes, then you're in the right place because that's all this channel's about. And I normally release a video every week. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description, and I reward my patrons with a different vector design each month. Also, there's a link to my Instagram, my Etsy shop, and the Facebook group. So anyway, that out of the way, let's crack on. Right, so we'll start with the vinyl cutter because that's sort of where the process starts. And although I said I wasn't going to be going into software side of things, I will actually just show you a couple of bits in here because, you know, if you've just got a vinyl cutter out the box, it might need setting up, and there's a few little things that even after it's set up, you might need to tweak. Like, for example, if you change the USB port, you might need to recalibrate your sort of blade settings. So this is my vinyl cutter. It's a GCC Expert 2. I think I paid about £700 for it, and that was quite a while ago. I don't know if you can get these anymore or what the newer model is, but it's a great vinyl cutter. You know, not top of the range, but really good. I've had prior to that 2 vinyl cutters, and they were a bit cheaper, and they worked, and they were okay for what I was doing at the time. But you know, when you looked up close at the details and it was cutting out really fine fonts, it just wasn't getting that kind of accuracy, and they both broke, you know, after a short space of time. So I think it is important to kind of, if you're going to invest somewhere, invest the money in a good vinyl cutter. So I'll just move over to it and show you a couple of features on it. So these white parts here are basically the only bits where your runners can grip onto. If you do it outside of that, it's not going to connect properly. Another thing, and you know, like with any equipment, you are going to have to do a minor bit of maintenance, but really all you have to do on these is not even really change the blade that much, but just check it. So here's, excuse me, hang on. So this is the blade. You can just push it like that, and then you can take it out. Now the blades for these are quite expensive actually, compared to something like a Roland or Graphtec blades, but I've never replaced this. I've had this same blade for, don't even know, 7 years probably, and it's still fine. Another thing to do is if you're cutting really fine details, there's a chance that it might sort of pluck that, and then you'll end up with a build-up of vinyl all in here. So it's worth just taking that out every now and then. And also to check your blade depth. Now, you really want to be just seeing that blade peeking out over the top. And to change that, you just kind of rotate this up and down and do it by eye. And that looks about right to me. I'm not sure how well that's coming out on the camera. So let's just pop that back in. So getting to set up, what I've done is I've plugged this into a USB port that I've never used before. So that should be pretty good to show you how to kind of calibrate the blade. So let's just switch this on. Right, so within here, all I'm going to do is go to File, Cut, and I'm going to go to the vinyl spooler. Now, firstly, let's just go check the connection. So it's saying it hasn't found anything, so we want to detect it. So, I'm going to turn off the device, plug in the device, turn it back on, and click Next to continue. So, just turn that on. Right, so that's detected the vinyl cutter, but now I just want to make sure everything's lined up so I get the nicest cut. So let's go to calibration, and I'm going to go to blade offset. Perform calibration. So what I now want to do is check how that calibration came out. So let's and what you're doing is basically seeing where that line perfectly meets the top line. So going along, you can see obviously when you're getting past 15 they're going way over, but I mean at the moment 0 looks spot on. So yeah, 0 looks good, so I'm just going to go with that as is, and that's your vinyl cutter setup. So basically back in the software, looking at what the cut just did along here, whichever one you think is perfect, that's the value that you put in here. Now 0 was pretty bang on, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Right, so moving on to the compressor now. Now before I show you my setup, I just want to kind of let you know that my setup isn't really going to be any good for if you wanted to do this as a business and produce stuff in quite high volumes. And that's because my compressor isn't good enough to run the Sandblaster. So essentially what I do is the compressor will fill up, I'll sandblast, but the compressor can't keep up with the amount of air that the Sandblaster's kicking out. So when I look at the pressure gauge and then it's not kicking out anything above 30 psi, I kind of stop and then just wait for the compressor to fill up again. It's a bit annoying. I'll probably get 2 minutes blasting, then have to wait 5 minutes for it to fill up. So like I say, you really do want to get a decent compressor if this is going to be something you do as a job. So I'll show you mine and how it's set up and a few little things that you should get for it that will help out in the long run. So pop this here. So firstly, not a part of the compressor and not a part of the Sandblaster, but I'd strongly recommend getting one of these. What it basically does, this is the tube coming from the compressor, and ordinarily this would just run right through into the Sandblaster, but compressors do suck in moisture, and this thing here contains that moisture, so you can, there's none in there at the moment, but you can just get that out. This has also got a pressure gauge, which you'll have on the Sandblaster around the front, but you know, you can kind of just use this one instead. So hooked up, sucks out the moisture, and you can control the pressure with it as well. Now this particular compressor is a hydrovane, and what that means is basically the way of it generating the air to get into the tank is a vane or a propeller. So in here there's a propeller that kind of sucks the air in and it ends up in the tank. The bonus about these is the propeller is much quieter than your kind of standard compressor, which is generating the air by pistons. So while this one will kind of whir and hum, most compressors, which you'd probably be looking at, you get much more powerful one than this, but it will generating air by pistons, and they pretty much shake the room. They're really loud, and yeah, and they vibrate. Something to know about compressors as well is, like, this little thing here is sucking air, or sorry, this little thing here is preventing air getting through to the Sandblaster, but obviously that air is coming from the compressor, so you do need to drain these. So on this one, I'll just turn this upside down and see if you can see down here, there's a little tap there, and you'd basically, when the compressor's empty, so no air in it, open the tap and then turn the compressor on, and then when it generates a little bit of air, that'll start kicking the water out. The reason that is an important step is because the water will rust the inside of the compressor, so it's easy to forget about it, but I've left it too long before, and then when I've sort of emptied it, the water that came out was brown and rusty, so you don't want to ruin the compressor, so it's best to just keep on top of that. The only other thing in terms of maintenance of these is oil. You know, this here comes off and I put my vane oil in here. Depending on what compressor you get will depend on what oil you use. You know, so hydrovane oil is specific to a vane compressor, but you can get just standard compressor oil for a piston compressor. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. I think they're very low maintenance. They'll last forever, I think, if you keep on top of the maintenance. And yeah, definitely a good investment. Right, so moving on to the Sandblaster now. So the model I've got is a SBC 420. I think the SBC just stands for Sandblasting Cabinet, but I'll take you over and show you around it. So firstly, as mentioned with the compressor before, the air comes in here and then through to a sandblasting gun, which is within the cabinet itself. So a few must-haves here. I haven't got it on at the moment because I've just replaced it, but you'll want to be putting a sheet of acetate over the glass, because even if you're sandblasting deep within the unit here, there's going to be grit coming back and that'll etch this glass. So if you've just got a clear piece of acetate on here, wipe this down, gaffer tape it on, and then eventually you won't be able to see through that, so you can then just replace it. It's cheaper and easier than replacing a piece of glass. Another little bit of maintenance that you'll need to do is replacing the sandblasting nozzles. So this particular one is new, and that's about right. Number 6 nozzle. They just come in and out of the gun by unscrewing this. Oh, bear with me. And that's what they look like from the front and back. So let's pop this in here. Here's an example of a good one and one that needs replacing. And you'll know when they're replacing because you'll just start losing suction. You'll be able to feel it under the foot pedal that it's just not kicking out the right sort of pressure. So yeah, these are around about £15 for 4, and you normally get 2 6s and 2 7s. Another thing with this particular model, if I just show you down here so that you can see how steep it is, it's not actually steep enough for the sand to just fall down, so I have to kind of do that manually, and the way I do that is by opening this side door, lifting this up, and then you can see some of that sand is stuck on the side. And what I'd do is just get a bit of wood and then just push it down into the bottom. It's not too bad at the moment, but eventually that bottom hole will just be a gaping hole and it's hardly sucking any sand down. So just good to kind of slide it down. You can sort of budge it by kicking it a bit, but it's probably better to just do it with a bit of wood. Lastly, in terms of maintenance, the way this is working is it's kicking out the grit. The grit that is heavy enough to be recycled will fall down here, and the grit that isn't, and whatever you're kind of blasting away, will be sucked up here into a filter. That filter is around the back here. And this is it. So all you need to do is just take this out every now and then, take the filter out, and then just blast it away with this sort of air hose, and just hit it to get as much of that excess sand out. There's a pretty tokenistic little thing here, which is supposed to tap it and then empty the sand out here, but I mean that isn't doing anything. It's a waste of space. So you really want to be unplugging this, taking this out, and giving it a good clean, because otherwise the motor will end up conking out. I've had one of these motors conk out, and they're about 70 or 80 quid to replace, which is best off if you don't have to keep doing that, I suppose. The blasting cabinet itself, back when I bought it, was £700, but they're still available, the same model, and I just looked and they're about £800. So I've had this, I don't know how long, but probably nearly 10 years, and love it. Probably my favourite bit of kit. And that's it. That was my setup, so I hope that's given you some ideas of what you can get for yourself. Obviously, in some cases, mine isn't really up to the job, but really that is going to depend on how much you want to produce in terms of volume and whether it's going to be a job or a hobby. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.